Are you going to take any action as far as a suit against the Liberal Party?
I have yet to get, although I've asked for, a copy of the precise statement that was issued. All I've seen up to this point was some of the newspaper comments about it and some excerpts that were read to me on the telephone. I would like to see the statement and then have it analyzed and then make the determination as to just what, if anything, I'll do. I can assure you of this. If it is true that they have said that I have misused my public office for private purposes, I certainly will bring the appropriate action, whether it be in the nature of an indictment for criminal libel or a civil libel suit. That will have to be determined at a later time.
Congressman, you've been mentioned in connection with some of the Baker hearings in Washington. What is your comment about the Baker case?
If anyone would take the time or the trouble to read the testimony in the Baker case, insofar as it refers to me, I think they would very quickly conclude that there was nothing of substance or otherwise that connected me with any wrongdoing of any kind whatsoever. The testimony that was offered that brought my name into the picture was to the effect that someone had come to see me, and nothing had come of it. I neither encouraged them nor did anything about the matter that they came to see me about. The first time I heard the word magic was when I read the newspapers with reference to the Baker hearings. And the only reference in those hearings to Congressman Multar was that someone came to see me about the matter and I did nothing for them.
Would you be in favor of the Baker hearing continuing or even being broadened?
I don't think it would be appropriate for a member of the House of Representatives to determine what the other body, the Senate, should do. I do believe that if there's any legislation that should be introduced, the record indicates what legislation, if any, should be introduced to cover any situation that is not already covered by legislation. I think the legislation is ample on the books today. It prohibits members of Congress of either body from engaging in activities that would bring them any monetary gain. I think it's the duty of members of Congress to help their constituents and to intercede on their behalf before executive agencies of the government, but they must not do that for compensation. I have never done it for compensation, and I don't know how you could change that situation. This talk about conflicts of interest is fine, but what are you going to do about it? The dishonest legislator, and there are very few of them in my opinion, isn't going to do these things out in the open, and a law that prohibits them from doing them is already on the books. Now what is it that you're going to legislate about? What is it they would like to legislate so far as the Baker situation is concerned? I'd like to hear some constructive suggestions as to what kind of legislation is necessary to prevent these kind of activities. For instance, the charges leveled against me is that I've engaged in outside activities. None of them involve the federal government, but I made money at them, they say. Well, is that wrong? This is the very basis of the American democracy, that a man can start out as a poor boy or with nothing and finally arrive at the heights, whether in business or in politics. Anyone who with the ability has the right to do it. And this is good American doctrine, and I believe in it. And the only thing that I've seen that I've been charged with is that I've been engaged in some legitimate activities, and I've made some money out of them.
Congressman, the subject of ethics, of course, has been in the headlines here in New York State as well as on the national scene. Do you think that sentiment today has put legislators on the defensive, that they have to defend themselves now? Do you think the onus is on them to prove they have a clean slate?
Unfortunately, you are right in the implication of your question, that the onus has been put upon the legislators. The atmosphere has been built up to indicate that all legislators are bad people, that they, instead of attending to their business as legislators, are devoting their time to how they can make money. Well, this is not so. The average legislator is a decent, honorable fellow who, when he takes on the government service, makes that his first order of business. I've done it, and I know that most of my colleagues have done the same thing. This is the first call on their time. And bear in mind, having in mind specifically legislators, these men were intended to be part-time officials. They were never intended to be called upon to devote their full time to it, yet most legislators do give their full time to it. It's unfair to expect a man who is elected to a 2-year term or to a 4-year term to give up all his outside activities, devote himself to his legislative work, and then if he should be defeated at the end of the 2-year term or the 4-year term, he's got nothing to fall back on. Bear in mind that in the United States Congress, the law says in so many words, the Congress shall adjourn on July 31st of every year. Was this intended to be a full-time job? Or was this intended because of the very nature of the work, that the man continued to have his activities and engage in the same activities that he engaged in before being elected, so that he could be back in his district, that he could continue to deal with the people he dealt with, that he dealt with before he became a legislator? The very foundation, the very fundamentals of our American democracy, as it is, I think, of most free democracies throughout the world, is that you draw your legislators from every segment of the economy. They're lawyers, they're doctors, they're farmers, they're businessmen, so they can bring to bear upon their legislative work their very broad experiences in each of these fields. They're not elected because they are lawyers or because they are farmers, but they are elected because they're representing the people of their community, and they're not expected to give up their outside activities, nor are they expected to devote themselves exclusively to legislative work. I do say they must lean over backwards, as I have done and as most of my colleagues have done, so there should be no conflict of interest, so that they do not represent a client and the United States government or the local government at the same time. This is an attempt, I think, by some people to befog the issue and show there's something bad where there is nothing bad. The whole word conflict of interest has been misconstrued. As long as a man is going about his usual activities and is not taking anything from the United States government, if he's a representative in Congress, that he should not take. As long as he's doing his job and not representing both sides, there is no conflict of interest.
Will ethical defense be a part of your campaign for re-election?
Will ethical defense? Now, I don't know what you mean.
On these issues, on these discrediting that has been raised in general about legislators, will this play a part in your campaign? Will you devote time to defending yourself?
Well, obviously, the charges having been made, I'm not going to run away from them. I'll certainly meet them. I've done nothing wrong, and I intend to tell the people in detail. And any time any question is raised about anything that I've ever done, in or out of public office, I've never done anything wrong out of public office. I've never done anything wrong in public office. And any time any specific charge is made, I expect to be able to answer fully and clearly, unequivocally. I've done nothing unethical. I've done nothing immoral. I've done nothing illegal.